Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Armando. How are you?
I'm all right.
Have you been enjoying going to the Benson Center and getting lunch?
Yes, nice to get out of the house and see other people, friends, and give a hard time to Sabrina. I enjoy giving a hard time to Sabrina.
I'm glad you have something to make your day.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I got a question for you.
Yes.
Have you sat in the dining hall and eaten?
Yes, I saw there yesterday.
Oh, did you? Okay. I saw you come in, but I didn't know if you stayed or if you had left. So.
No, I stayed. Yeah. And I'm going to there today. And I already checked with Sarah if we're going to have fried catfish on Friday. And the cook told me, yes. I didn't see the chef. I saw other lady who's cooking. They showed me that lady.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know the other guy used to be there before. I didn't see him. So I don't know.
You mean Quentin?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, he's the chef.
I didn't see him. You know, he's always there up front talking to us. So this time I didn't see him.
Yeah, I saw him yesterday. I mean, he was there. I mean, I talked to him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was going through the line. Yeah.
Well,
he's definitely on site, but you know, I mean, hey, you know, he's busy. You know, he's in the middle of lunch and he's trying to, you know, make sure everything is getting out there. So
I was there messing with the lady as usual.
Okay.
So.
Wow.
I didn't see other people used to be there, John, all the time, all the guy, Tom, and no.
Well, I was only there yesterday, and you know, pretty much so. Other than coming out, you know, for lunch, and I sat down and I talked to Ed Mercer and his wife.
Yeah, Pat.
Yeah, Pat.
I know that lady for a long, long time.
Yeah.
She used to live, I don't know if she lives in Brookhaven area.
I believe so. Yeah, they're kind of over in that area at any rate.
Because I used to work for Kroger in Brookhaven, and they used to shop there. So that's what I met her.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I sat with them for a little while and kind of caught up. And but other than that, I was kind of back in the back, and I was either doing the class yesterday afternoon, or I was looking at inventory, you know, as far as materials and things for the drawing class and the clay, and you know, trying to figure out, you know, what we needed and how we're going to kind of pull this off. So, you know, interesting, fun stuff. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, so let's see. We got a few people here. We got 5 of us.
Who is Kate Jack?
Oh, that's Bernice.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, hey, Bernice.
Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Hi, Miss Bernice.
Yeah.
You did? You missed me when?
I said hi.
Oh.
We always miss you when you are not here. Yeah.
Okay.
You are not here.
That's true.
I am back.
Well, and we're happy to hear that and see you back as well. And then there's Naomi, who is still being silent.
Well, we never see her face.
No.
I don't know how she looks. No.
She looks like Naomi.
Yes, I know. Oh, Veronica, yeah, I know her very well.
Well, I actually have a question for Naomi, because now everybody knows that there was registration yesterday. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Because well, you know, I got quite a few phone calls, And the way this is kind of working out is right now, both the clay class and the drawing class on Friday are full for the first 6 weeks.
Okay.
Are you going to have drawing class over there?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
6 weeks is a quarter? I thought it was like 12 weeks for the quarter.
Well,
I think they changed it a little bit, Bernice.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, if I may, it is 12 weeks for the whole quarter, but we're breaking it into first and second sessions, right?
Oh,
And so
okay.
you get 6 weeks, and then you get 6 weeks. And,
Okay.
you know, this isn't absolutely official, but my understanding was that you could take a class, you know, but you have to pick one of those 6-week classes. You can't like repeat the class because they're trying to keep it open, you know, to as many people as possible because we have really limited numbers right now. So, well, look, it's Eloise. Hey, Eloise, how you doing?
Oh, hey.
Yeah,
All right.
Good. How's everybody?
we're good.
Good.
We missed
I don't know.
seeing you for quite a
So
while.
how many?
Yeah, I
I'm sorry?
took a little break.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I just want to let you know you were missed. Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm. Now, how many days a week can we take classes there?
Well, you could take classes, you know, 5 days a week if you could find a class to take, you know, for every day. And there are different things going on.
But
No, I'm
My-
talking about your classes.
Well, you can take my classes 5 days a week as well.
but if you didn't register yesterday, it's probably over, isn't it?
Well, and that's what I was saying for
Okay.
me, and I'm sure different instructors are different. But because we're breaking it up into the first session, second session, the first session, both of the clay class and of the drawing class are both full. The second
Okay.
session, I have 2 spaces in the drawing in the morning, and I have 2 spaces in the clay in the afternoon.
Oh, so you register for the first 6 weeks and the second 6 weeks.
Yeah, we're registering both at the same time.
Oh.
And so when people contacted me, you know, my question to them was, okay, you know, do you want from, if I can remember the dates correctly, it starts on February 25th, goes through April 1st, I believe. And then from April 8th to May, I want to say 13th. Okay. And those are the 2
Well-
6-week sessions.
Will these Zoom classes still be offered?
Yes. Now, what's happening with Zoom is that, you know, I've got Zoom classes scheduled through April 1st, okay? And so from between now and April 1st, all of the classes that I've got scheduled will still remain the same. The only thing that will change or be different about the Zoom class on Friday and the drawing class is that I'll be doing it actually from Benson, okay? And we'll have some people actually in a studio, you know, working while you guys are online working. So it will be what's referred to as a hybrid class. There'll be people online, there'll be people on site at the same time. Okay?
Can we still talk to you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just like you're talking to me now.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Okay. But on Friday, you know, what we're mainly going to be doing is we're going to be drawing. Okay. Now, one of the things that may change on Fridays is we may start doing some long drawings. We may start doing some still lives. And you'll be basically looking at the same thing that they're looking at.
Mhm.
And I don't really know how I'm going to do that. You know, I don't know whether, you know, and it will depend on the equipment that we have, you know, whether I've got a video camera there that I can focus on the subject, or whether I can pre-photograph it and then post it online so that you guys can see it, and then they draw from, you know, the actual thing itself. But, you know, we're probably going to do some figurative stuff as well. And so in that case, they would be working from, you know, like something projected, you know, like on the large screen TV. And you guys would be drawing from the same image as they would be as well. So it'll be the same. It's just the location changes, you know. And instead of me sitting here in a nice, you know, big, you know, comfy chair, I'll be probably up moving around a little bit. So
That's good.
Yeah, it really won't change much. You know, like I said, up until April 1st. Okay. Then when April 1st rolls around, you know, obviously those classes on site will not be over. Okay. And so I'll continue on with those. The drawing class, you know, basically I'll just extend on Fridays. But what they're wanting me to do is to try to get more classes going, you know, in person. And my conversation with them was that, you know, starting April 1st, I would try to offer like a plein air class. So one day a week, you know, we would meet somewhere for anybody who was interested in doing that. And we would actually go out on.
Oh, okay. Now that class I would want to come to.
Me too. Me too, Bernice, because
Yeah,
you'll be
that-
outside,
yeah.
and I don't want to wear that mask for 2 hours.
Right. Well, now here's the thing, you know, on the plein air class, it is not going to be a 2-hour class.
No, I understand. That's okay. It's still outside, and
Yeah.
you still get to see everyone. That's good.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know,
could be
hone
a
your
full-
painting skills. It's all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4-hour class?
but it's more like about.
There you go, Gwen.
It's more like about a whole day. You know,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
we would
I love it.
meet, yeah, we would meet about 10 o'clock. We would end at about 4 o'clock. You know, and that
Okay.
way people could get wherever they needed to go, and you know, they're not in the middle of rush hour. You know, either in the morning or in the evening. And you know, it
We've
would,
done that before.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it would give everybody a good long day to paint. Now, in the past, when I've done that, you know, we've provided materials like oil paint and stuff, and we're probably not going to do that this time. Okay.
Oh.
You know, probably what we would do is, you know, everybody will work with their own materials for right now. Okay. So you can paint on anything you want. Now, I do have, okay, a enormous amount of acrylic paint. And so what I was thinking I would do is I would always come out with a backup of acrylic paint and some paper plates and things like that that people could set up. And if you want to work in acrylic, you know, we can do that. Okay. You know, so, you know, I'm trying to work with what we've got, and I'm trying to, you know, we've had inventory sitting there for 2 years, not being used. And so, yeah, we need to use a lot of that stuff, not just let it, you know, go away. That's my thought. Anybody got any thoughts about that, or?
No, I think that works. I definitely will be interested in the plein air
Mhm.
and the second half of the drawing class, since you do have 2 spots, 2 available spaces.
Okay. Yeah, in the second session.
Yes, the second session, not the first one.
Yeah, well,
I didn't want to, I have to prepare my brain for that mask.
Okay.
What's the difference between the first and the second?
Yeah. Now,
Hmm?
now let me say this too. Okay. Right now, okay, and we're just talking about like right at this minute, because
Okay,
everything is subject to change, right?
yes.
They've opened up the cinemas, and right now it is a requirement that everyone in that building is wearing a mask. Okay. Fulton County, there's a lot of places, removing those restrictions and things. I don't really know, here in a couple of weeks, they may go, yeah, we're not doing mask anymore. I don't know that. Okay. And
But that doesn't apply to plein air anyway, though, does it?
I'm sorry, what?
That doesn't apply to the outside classes, does it?
No,
Good.
no,
Okay.
no. If we're doing plein air, no, we can, we can spread out. We're not going to be in an enclosed space.
Mhm.
And at that point, if you want to wear a mask, that's fine with me. If you don't want to wear a mask, that's okay too.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm just not going to be, like standing right up against you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. We'll keep a little bit of distance and stuff. Not that I don't like you or anything. It's just, a prudent thing to do. Okay.
Well, yeah. The only thing that I would ask, after registering for plein air is, what would I need to bring besides paint? Because you have to have an easel or a certain type. I would just need a list of things that we might.
Me too, because I don't have a floor size easel. I know what you mean.
Right. That's all I have too, Bernice.
Well, and
Make
again,
sure you bring something to sit in or on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have
So
a
a
chair.
chair. We got that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so-
hat and
yeah. So
sunglasses.
let me kind of go through the list. Okay. And we'll just, just so you can. So the first thing I would think of is, what am I going to work with? Okay. And, now you could, if you have a paint box, one of the like French easels or whatever, you could put some oil paint and, a canvas on there and stuff and head on out for the day and brushes, and you'd be fine. Okay. But let's say that you don't have a plein air box. Okay. And let's say that you don't have oil paint. Let's just say that you have acrylic, right? Well, if you can work with acrylic on a canvas, you can work with acrylic on a piece of mixed media paper, or watercolor paper, or, lots of different surfaces. All of those could be put on a drawing board. And if you had a chair and a little folding table, right? A container for water, your acrylic paint, and, whatever you're going to paint on, taped down to that board, you'd be able to sit there and paint, as much as you want. You don't have to have an easel. Okay. If you're doing watercolors, it becomes even more simple because watercolors are small. Again, you're going to need like a little tray of watercolors, a few brushes. If you buy watercolor paper that's on a block, you don't have to stretch it. You can just go out there, open up the pad, start working. Again, having a chair and a small little folding table would be really helpful because it would give you something to put your brushes and stuff on. You could come out with colored pencils. You could come out with pastels. You could come out with, all kinds of materials. Okay. As I said, my thought is I have lots and lots of bottles of acrylic that we got in just before, we all left the center. And so, I'll probably bring, at least the primary, secondary colors out, plus white and acrylic. And if you want to work in acrylic and you want to bring paint brushes with you, and maybe a tray or something to put the acrylic in, and some paper towels, You can
Yeah.
work with what I bring out there. Okay. So there's lots of options. And, we'll work it out. But, just kind of think about, you're going to need, unless you like standing. And I think for the most of us, standing for a little while is okay. If we're going to be out there all day, you're probably going to want to bring a chair, of some sort, a little folding chair of some sort. A folding table, we're talking about like a little TV tray table, something lightweight. I've seen them, they have the little metal ones that are very lightweight. The only issue with those lightweight metal tables is if it's a windy day, they tend to blow away. Okay. But
Yeah.
if you have, a container, like a large container with water in it, sitting on top of it, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay.
No, don't do that.
Anything that you put weight,
No,
weight on, it'll be stable. The wooden folding tables work really well. They're pretty stable. You don't have to worry about the wind blowing them over because they've got a little more heft to them. And those are fine. So just kind of be thinking in line of, okay, what can I easily carry around, and all the places that we're going to go to, I'm going to try to keep it down where there's not like, a ton of walking, right? Where you don't have to go like, we don't have to walk like 2 miles to get to where we're painting. We'll be able to drive up, park somewhere relatively close by, within a couple 100 yards, and paint. Okay. And I'm going to try to make this somewhat convenient, for everybody, or equally inconvenient for everybody. Well, because I'm going to try to go to different locations in different parts of the town or city. So I'll try to go out on the west side. I'll try to go south. I'll try to go north.
No.
And pick a variety of places
Go get your
so that we're, not always, I know that some of you are on the south end of town. Some of you are in town. Some of you are outside. So I'm going to try to pick different places, that we can go to each week. And like I said, we just meet there at 10. Now, in the past, we've done lunch in kind of an interesting way, which is generally, people will, give a few bucks, and we'll go to Publix and we'll pick up, like sandwiches, and pick up like a couple of different sandwiches and then put them all back and, split them. And that's fine with me if we want to do that. If you want to bring your own lunch, that's okay too. If you don't want to eat lunch, I understand. That's okay too. But we'll just kind of work it out, as we go along. So I would recommend, other than the stuff to paint with, and Gwen mentioned this, you're going to need a hat. Okay. Baseball cap is fine. But if you have a wide brimmed hat, that's better.
No. There's no.
Okay.
We don't need umbrella.
Well, if you're trying to stay out of the rain, maybe.
You're not talking about a beach umbrella.
Well, if you're trying to stay out of the rain, if you're trying to stay out of the sun, you could bring, a big umbrella. I don't know how convenient that would be for you to lug a couple 100 yards from your car. Probably not easy. So, most of the places that we'd go to, you'd be able to either, find a shady spot or a sunny spot, either one. My recommendation in painting plein air, if you haven't done it before, is always try to get under a tree. you know, with some overhanging branches. And the reason being, trees give off oxygen. And as they do, there's always just a little bit of air movement underneath them. If it gets warm, you know, it's going to be cooler under a tree than it is, you know, standing out in the field. Okay? So, you know, but we'll talk about that stuff, you know, when we get out there. And
yeah,
but that's kind of the plan.
when we get there.
So what we'll end up doing, you know, or happening kind of April 1st is one of the days of the week will go away off Zoom and we'll be doing live. Okay. And it will probably be on Wednesday is my guess. Yeah, either Wednesday or Thursday. But, you know, we'll figure that out as we get closer. Okay. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
No, not yet. I don't have any questions yet.
Okay. Anybody else?
We wanted to do it again.
What was that, Eloise?
What other day did you say besides Wednesday?
It'll be either a Wednesday or Thursday.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, you know, right now. You know,
Because Friday, the traffic too heavy on Friday. Yeah, so I like those 2 days.
well, I can't do Friday because I already have classes scheduled that I have to be on at Vincent. So,
But as I say, I'm happy with Wednesday and Thursday. I think the traffic too so bad on Friday.
oh, okay. All right. Anyway, so guess what we're going to do today? Other than sit and talk theoretically about what's going to happen in the future. Okay. We're actually going to watch 2 videos. One of them is on color. I know you guys have no interest in that whatsoever, right? And you know all about color, so you don't need to watch it, right? But the other is, interestingly enough, about watercolor.
Oh,
And,
that'll be good.
yeah, but it's not just about painting in watercolor. It's about a guy who actually makes his very own watercolor. And he shows you how to do it, okay? So if you ever wanted to make, you know, your own color, you know, watercolor, you could do that right at home. Anyway, it's an interesting video. They're both about an hour each, a little under, you know. And so we're going to start off with the watercolor one first. And, you know, I'm going to try to skip a lot of the front end of it because it's just a lot of kind of promotion and talk and yada, yada, yada. You know, this is one of these streamlined videos, and I'll try to get down to the point where, you know, we're getting into kind of the meat and potatoes and he's actually showing you how to do stuff. So even though it says it's 51 minutes, we'll probably only watch like probably about 40 minutes of it. Okay. And then the second one, kind of the same thing. And then we'll talk a little bit about it afterward. All right. Yeah, this guy right here. And go full screen with it. Now let's back him up. To about right there. Let's try it.
To give their paint its particular qualities. If you like it soupy, you're going to get maybe more honey in it.
Hang on. Let me back him up a little further.
Learning how to create my own watercolor.
Okay, so the guy, the painter,
Great.
his
I
name
love
is Stuart
it
White.
for a long time, mostly because it's a very effective way of getting a lot of color down in a simple way. Yes, it's very simple. And then you can get gradations just by using water. You can move things up. You don't have to add white to get tones. And in architectural rendering, let's just show you an example of this. Is a little bit of a little street scene of a proposed neighborhood. So in order to get that little believability factor, I go out and paint a lot of people sitting outside or under umbrellas, or I really had to pay attention to how to communicate the depth of windows and things like that just with a couple of marks, because it was always a deadline. So anyway, I thought I'd start off today about the paint that, when you go to the art supply store, and we love it, I find myself, really having to think how much I have to really control myself to just quit grabbing tubes off the shelf. And I found that for a lot of colors, I can really make my own and save an awful lot of money. Plus, it's a real pleasure to make paint. So I'm going to make up a little bit of an orange color, and I'll show you how simple it is. What you need is some dry pigment. There's a couple of brands we don't need to go into, but just look for dry pigment. It all comes from the same source. It's good old Mother Earth. Cadmium yellow, some red, and I've got a little lollipop stick, popsicle stick here. And you get yourself some watercolor medium. It's made commercially. It comes in a bottle. This is from Kramer. You can get it from Winsor Newton. I believe a lot of people make watercolor medium. It's just
what exactly is watercolor medium?
It's a combination of three elements: glycerin, gum arabic, and honey. And manufacturers play with those three variables to give their paint its particular qualities. If you like it soupy, you're going to get maybe more honey in it. If you like it a little solid, maybe it's got more gum arabic in it. It also has to do with the transparency of the pigment, and that's one thing I like to have a little say about, how much transparency. So if you'll just excuse me, I'm going to put this camera down on my lab table here.
I'll tell you what, while you're doing that, I'm going to pull you off. You get set up, and then I'll be right back. Our guest today is Stuart White, Great Watercolors. He's going to be part of Watercolor Live. You're going to love that. That's coming up in January. The world's largest watercolor conference. It's pretty cool. Anyway, Stuart has a couple of videos out that I mentioned. He's got painting in architecture and watercolors. Really incredible. And I want you to be aware. Now, back to
skipping forward.
Okay, did you get set up?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do this.
Okay.
All right. There we go. That's a funny angle, but that's what we got to work with here. Yeah, I overheard what you were saying. I think the lineup that you've got for Watercolor Live is really impressive. There's fantastic painters in that group. So very honored to be a part of that. And I gotta say, I got so much out of Realism Live, of watching Kwang Ho and all these various painters when I had the chance to do it. And there's so much I want to learn about oil painting, and these guys know it. They keep it simple for me, and it's just something I keep in my mind while I'm painting. So anyway, I put a little bit of cadmium yellow deep into my this little plastic cup, and then I'm putting just a little bit, doesn't take much, of cadmium red medium in there. These are strong colors, so I'm not really sure how dominant we're going to be, but let's just see what we get.
Okay, so those tuning in, he's using dry pigments that you can buy in a lot of art stores or buy online, and you can get every color imaginable. And now he's adding a watercolor medium, which has a mixture of other products in it.
Yeah, it's a formulation of gum arabic, honey, and glycerin. So some are more honey based than others. But anyway, I'm just going to put in a little drop or two. There you go. That's all you need. I'll just take this is really finely ground pigment, so I don't really have to use a motor or a grinder or any of that stuff. So I'm going to take this. Just going to move it up and look at that gorgeous color. Anyway,
Well,
It's starting to get like toothpaste consistency. And, you know, I wish there was more to it than that because it's less impressive, but that's it. That's watercolor. That's what comes out of those tubes.
Now, will you let that dry so you can put it in pads, or do you like it?
You could. I like to just mix up enough to do a big wash on a piece of paper. It is, you know, a little bit at a time. Because I do have plenty of tube paints, and I'll take with me. I have them in the studio. I take them with me when I do plein air things. But if you've really got a lot to cover and you want some really rich darks, I recommend making your own color. Because, you know, beginning watercolor, the weakness of most of those paintings is that it's over diluted. That's because you're trying to be thrifty with your paint. And if you've got powdered paint, I think you can just be real generous with it and just let it go. So there we go. Got a little thing. I've got a little piece of 8th sheet here that I'm going to just show you how to do a flat wash. Just take a mop brush, just so we don't get any streaks. I'm going to just lightly go over this with water. That's okay.
You use tap water, or you use distilled water?
Yeah, I just use tap water. If you were going to mix a bunch of paint, I would put a few drops of distilled water in it, and if you wanted to store it, because then you know you don't have any impurities or things like that in it. Okay, so let's take our mixture and load that brush up. I think I've got it mixed up pretty well. And then, oh, that is strong stuff, man.
Well, that's what you want, right?
That's what you want. That's right. I mean, it will dry a little lighter, but
you find that when you mix
that's
your
a flat
own,
wash right there.
you find when you mix your own, you get much stronger than you would get out of the tube, or is it you just would have to use so much out of the tube that this is more economical?
Yeah, if you took a cadmium orange, which is basically what we have here, if you took I can see there's a lot of glare on the thing, but I can tell you this is one really, really thick, flat wash here. If you took that right out of the tube, you just squeezed out about $17 worth of paint. And, you're not going to just get the density of this. And this is just two little thimblefuls of the powdered pigment. I did one earlier with red. And I'm going to go ahead and take that mix, and you can put it over it after it's really bone dry, and then you get this really, really vivid red orange. And it's yeah, I mean it's super exciting. If you want to take this wash that I just did, you wanted to make it a graded wash, it would just start with some water at the top. But this pigment is so strong, it's hardly making a dent. There we go. I got to really flush that with water to get it down to that paint just buried itself into the paper. You just use your mop like you would a big floor mop. You just come in, slap it around. Don't stop when you're doing this, because if you stop, you're going to start creating streaks. And don't fuss with it. Don't keep going back and forth on it. Just come down one smooth, easy motion.
Okay, there's a question from India. It says, what is the name of the vibrant color you are using? Just for the benefit of the people who might have missed that, will you do another remix of the colors?
This color is something I just mixed up. It's powdered yellow and powdered red. And they're both cadmiums, and that is a, you know, it would be a cadmium orange, basically.
Will you show that one more time, mixing some color again? Just because there are people who
interested.
yeah,
I will
absolutely.
probably do this at Watercolor Live. Just show some, you know, different things you can do with the color mixing as you make your own custom color. If you find yourself using a certain blue, it's not in a tube, but you like a mixture of, say, lavender and cobalt, you just pre-mix a batch of it, and there you go. Right, so
how easy is it to predict? So if you take the powdered colors and you mix them together, what you see in the mixture of the two powders, is that pretty much what you're going to get, or do you have to kind of experiment?
Yeah, it's a good question, because that's something I think a little experience would say. You know, is it you know, reds are going to be more dominant than the yellow. In a way, you guys say, well, maybe for every one, you know, two parts of yellow, it's one part of red, depending on what you get. You're gonna need to do color charts, you know, just the way Richard Schmidt tells you to do. You know, it's just make those little grids and see and write it down. This is what I used. This is what I did. This is what I got. And before long, your brain will have that in its memory, and you'll intuitively know how much to mix. So for those of you that are just coming in, I'm just gonna add a red in here, and there it is, just a little bit. I mean, this is gonna last me a long time. So I'm gonna put a little bit in there. I don't forget to put the glycerin in there, because if I don't, what I'll have is basically a tempera in water that won't be fixed into the paper, and it'll be easy for water to pick it up. It'll be powdery. The glycerin is what gives it its watercolor qualities. If I were to add linseed oil to that, of course, I'd be having oil paint. If I put egg yolk in here with distilled water, I have an egg tempera. It's the same pigment. So, I mean, I don't know if it's coming across. This is a vivid.
All right, did all of you get that?
Not really. It's kind of breaking up on my end.
Or is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what he just said was that with that dry pigment, you know, the only difference between oil paint, watercolor, egg tempera, wash, and you know, like acrylic, is the medium. You know, it's the binding medium. So, like, for example, let's say that you wanted to make your own acrylic paint. Okay, you could take that, you know, clear, like, acrylic medium, say a gel, like a heavy gel medium or a gel medium, and you could take that dry pigment and you could make your own acrylic paint. Because all acrylic paint is that painting medium plus pigment. So you can make your own custom colors in acrylic. Watercolor, you add that, you know, it's gum arabic, glycerin, and he said honey. I wasn't aware that they put honey in watercolor, but okay. I knew about the gum.
I was not aware of that either. I can see the glycerin and I can see the gum arabic, but not the honey.
Yeah. And in oil paint, it's basically, well, you're putting, in most oil paint, it's a base of linseed oil with the pigment, but a lot of the paint manufacturers put different types of waxes in there. Like they might put, you know, some kind of like microcrystalline wax or something in there, which gives the paint a harder film in the long run. But, you know, again, different manufacturers have slightly different recipes. And, you know, if you just, you know, added linseed oil, you know, to the oil, you know, to the dry pigment, you'd be making oil paint. So, Same thing with egg tempera. Egg tempera, you would, basically use the egg white, not the yolk, but the white. And you would add the pigment to the egg white, and you'd be, doing egg tempera, just which is pretty much so what most artists worked with, pre-Renaissance, because it was really about the Renaissance that they started making oil paint for the first time.
Charles, did they do that into wet plaster or on top of dry plaster, or either?
Well, now that's a process called fresco.
Yes.
And so, yes, they would use pigmented paints that they would mix up. And in the case of fresco, most of it is a tempera mixture. So it's the pigment and water. And then they would add a little bit of plaster into the mixture. But, and then that would be actually painted on wet plaster.
Okay, because those have held up for, in some instances, several thousand years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But the important thing in doing fresco was the fact that you were working with basically just pigment and water, making a tempera paint. And if you did that and put it on a canvas or put it on a paper, it's going to sit on top of the paper surface, right? But by taking a small amount of plaster and adding to that very same mixture, and then taking that mixture and painting it or working it into a wet plaster surface, because it's already got plaster in it, the color just sinks right into the plaster itself and penetrates, the plaster surface. And so it makes it more durable,
But what would he do if he was just adding egg white and not going to do plaster? He would just use paper?
Yeah. Now that's basically the medium that Andrew Wyeth used, was egg tempera.
No, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Wyeth was mainly working in egg tempera, and a lot of the things.
All of the whites.
Yeah. So you're taking egg white with pigment, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but not the yolk. Yeah. You don't want to use the egg yolk. You just want to use the white, and the white is the protein. It's the album, and the protein in there, which help kind of create, a hard film over the paint, protect it, and make it permanent. So, but just keep in mind that it doesn't matter what pigment you're using. They all started off as a powdered pigment, and that's what artists work with, even in the past. They would, get their raw materials, and a good portion of the time that they spent was grinding those materials down, to create the actual pigments, so they could make their own paint, for use that day or for a couple of days. With watercolor, the nice thing is if it dries out, you can put it into like a pan or something, make a little cake of it, and you can always go back and wet it and use it again.
Yeah, that's so nice, being able to reuse.
Yeah. Now with egg tempera, you can't do that. You have to make small batches, because once it dries out, that egg medium makes a permanent film over it, so you can't re-wet it and use it. So you got to make it in small batches. So it's a bit of a tedious process. Anyway.
Vivid red. Playing with dry pigment is just it's a sensual experience, because it's amazing when you get these colors extracted out of the earth. So what I tell beginners is like, well, take a little bit of effort to put this paint in a clear form in a tube and strong colors, and painters tend to like muddy them up by adding more and more stuff to it. Holy cow! This is that is surface red right there. That's really intense. It is intense, and I've already got it on a layer of that, and it'll dry probably a shade lighter, but it won't be pink. It'll be hot red. Oh, that's a good lesson. And okay, I was going to show you a little thing that's a trick that John Pike, who's a very well-known painter, makes. He's got several books out. I don't know if he's passed away or not, but anyway, I don't know. He's still around. I like John
He
Pike,
has.
this approach. And he had an interesting idea about washes. Now I have a scene here. This isn't the scene, but I wanted to show you that keeping a sketchbook is just such a fundamental part of understanding and planning and knowing what you want to get out of your painting. And I've got a large sheet here. I don't want to ruin it because I've got to spend money on it. And I put a little time into doing a drawing here. Can I adjust the camera a little bit here? Go for it. All right. Kind of an idea there. Now, I'm going to take water. Because that paper is so strong, it completely polluted my water reservoir. So fresh water here.
You have a sketch here that's got some tape on it. Can you explain what that's all about?
Thank you. Yeah. This is like different masking that I'm using. I use Crayola crayons, and I don't think there are any other wax crayons on the market, but it's your old reliable Crayolas that your kids have. And I've just sort of scribbled little lavenders and periwinkle and all their crazy names and kind of these burnt oranges and different things on this. I want them to be kind of fresh, and the wax crayon gives it an interesting texture. I've got this sort of earthy foreground down in here, and you may not see the crayon, but once I put a wash over it, they'll pop out. And I've got masking tape here as a way of getting around covering all this stuff with liquid Frisket. And Frisket is a latex product, and it's something I kind of stay away from because I tend to ruin brushes with it. You have to put like a little soapy water on your brush ahead of time. You'll probably be okay. But this is, for me, as I try to use the big areas, I'll use a masking tape that will pull off the paper without ripping it. So I think there's a Pro 3M product. It's called PRO, and it's really good on watercolor paper. It won't rip the edges, and it holds a good line. And then I have taken Frisket in certain areas and done little things that I want to withhold. And then if I want to do more lights that I've already painted over, then I'll have to resort to body color, which would be like a white wash. Okay, so I'm gonna take. Can I ask you another question first? What's that? What is this frame that you're using? It looks like a metal frame. It is. I love these things because I learned how to stretch paper with brown craft gum tape, and I got to where I was pretty good at it. But when it's all dry, you sort of have to pull it all off, or razor blade your painting off the board. The gum tape has to stick to certain surfaces that you use to stretch your paint. And what I've done is I took this piece of watercolor paper, I think it's 200-pound cold press paper. I put it in the bathtub, let it soak. Let it soak for about 5 minutes or so. That's enough for it. And then I put it on the side of the shower wall and sort of wipe off the excess. And I lay it down on this thing, and basically it's 3 or 4 screws on each side. It clamps down the edges, and then let it dry overnight. And this will buckle maybe a little bit if I really soak it, but it'll always dry flat. Done with it, you pop it out, you've got this perfectly flat painting. You can mask within this thing and the sizes that you actually want.
Is that a product that someone sells?
Yeah, it is. You can make your own, but the label, I think it's made in China.
Okay, that narrows it down to everything.
I'm sorry, I don't have the.
Okay, well, if you think about it, it's fine to put it in the comments.
I will definitely type that in. I'll find that. Anyway, I like to take a big brush called a butler and just wetting up the area a little bit because I want the paint to not be streaky when I put this in. You see, I'm just coming around the side of that. I'm not necessarily going to hit the inside of where this masking tape is. I can go ahead and when I start putting the pigment down, I want that to be light, want that to be light. I don't have to be so careful, and that's where you get these sort of self-conscious marks or streaks, or when you come around something, it shows up. You don't get the illusion of space going behind an object. So I'm going to just the John Pike trick is to just slightly on these washes, just slightly add a little bit of blue, magenta, and yellow. Pretty much the 3 colors that make up your color TV set: the cyan, primary yellow, and magenta. And he said it just makes it a better white underpainting than you would get with just clear water, and it gives it a sort of prismatic effect. And I never thought to do anything like that, but just that's a little bit of a cerulean blue, and I'm going to use little bits of yellow in there. And it may seem really strong at first, but it'll really almost disappear. This may not be I know it's not my final sky wash, but I just wanted to kind of cover it all up with these sort of prismatic colors, and they're very subtle. I'm not sure you can't see everything else, but it makes it for a more interesting white piece of paper. Just move it around. Some of the pigment's already going into the paper, so it's got a little variation, and it adds a lot of visual interest to this thing. So I'm going to actually let that first bit dry. I'm going to add some pink to that, or some of this paint that I just mixed up.
Love that dirty water.
As you can see how strong that paint is. I put the most, right out of the water thing. I still get a definite orange glow to this, and that's what I want. I want the painting to glow. That's what I think a good watercolor painting is. Let me show you how that masking part works. And I'm going to take the color, and when you go to Watercolor Live, I'll go into a whole lot of things about color mixing and color theory and what I want to do with that. I'll even tell you what colors I'm using, although I mostly focus on 4 elements: lighter, darker, warmer, cooler. So if I bring that in there, all the frisket, the crayons, and little things like that are starting to show up. And yeah, it's just gonna. Then I kind of look at that and say, well, what can I make of some of that? Because I know that a lot of this is sort of undergrowth, while that paint is working its way into the surface of the paper is kind of vulnerable to any kind of marks you want to make on it. I like to use like a chisel end. If you can use your fingernail. What that does is it actually bruises the paper.
Like a fingernail on a blackboard. Just saying. Hello, Barcelona.
All right. See. This is an old scene. I'm sure you can't take it out. It's beautiful old agricultural or cement hopper. I'm not sure what it is, but it's here in Easton, and it's got a lot of weathering to it. Nobody uses it anymore, but it's a great place to go and draw. Speaking of that, I it's a large piece of paper to work on plein air, but I would definitely draw on this in plein air because you copy a photograph, it starts to, there's something about drawing from nature that looks so different from drawing from a photograph. And it's maybe you're less precise, or maybe the way your eye perceives depth, it draws better from nature than it does from your photograph. Anyway, I've got a few things going on here that I can see are starting to be pretty interesting. And it's again, one of the things about watercolor that freak people out is you can't control it. Well, that's the beauty of watercolors, is it you're really making mud pies here and having a blast and seeing possibilities and opportunities in this. This is sort of a lavender gray. I'm going to add a little ochre to this. While you're putting it all wet, that's a good way to avoid mud because it starts to create its own visual mixes, or actually physical mixes right on the paper. And if you're just adding paint to something over and over and over, it just starts turning into mud. Right now you put these in there and it looks really fresh. It's got a lot of energy, and that's what I like in a watercolor. I like all those really meticulous ones as well. But my favorites are these sort of gestural, sergeant-like watercolors, that they're not overdone with detail. But again, each to his own. Anyway, this has got this. I wish you could see this, but it's got these beautiful glowing effects with this pale orange and had I guess a little bit of teal in there. And it's almost enough to leave it, but I do have plans for a darker sky to make some of these lights pop out. Well, how are we doing? Is there any questions out there? So
I don't see any questions, Stuart. We're doing fine. So basically, you wanted to show us kind of how you lay in that initial background. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the planning of this, on this piece, I know that I want to have this wash behind my big silo item here. I've got
Okay.
just get out there. This is still too wet for me to put a wash on it, but I can put a subtle lavender haze on the distance, and I think that'll be really nice and popping out. Popping out these forms that are in the foreground. So I'm gonna mix up a little lavender, which I use quite a bit of. I think Daniel Smith makes a really nice lavender. It's very creamy and really holds up nicely to mixing in with other colors. It's a nice neutral to add to things. So I love for people to have that in their palette. So it's good to have.
Again, the name of that is Daniel Smith.
Spritzer bottle nearby for re-wetting paper, re-wetting an area, diluting an area. Okay, so I'm going to, I know I've got a shadow in here. I've got a bit of a tank right here. I'm going to just go at a few things, go right up to the edge of my masking tape.
Let's go outside for a walk.
I think what I'll do is with that a little bit, see what happens. Starts running. I've got my board at a certain angle. It's probably 15 to 20. I'm going to up this up a little bit just to get some action in the back. Yeah, there's some interesting things happening there. And while something is wet, that's when you can really do the most effects and play with it. I think that if you want to do something like, I want to change the whole color of this sky, which I don't really want to do, I have here, then I'd probably start at the top, really pitch it up kind of at a 30-degree angle and really come down, try to flush out everything and go over with a new color. And these are old and beat up and weathered structures here. So if you get like little bits of paint on, it just kind of fits in and works to your advantage. So I get a nice razor edge on this. It's an old container back in here. So that's going to work. And once I've got that, I don't need to have this masking on here forever. In fact, you really don't want to leave masking tape on your paper for very long because the gum will start to transfer itself over to the paper and it'll be there forever.
I think Sergeant used masking.
Okay. I'm going to back that up for a second. All right. Let's go a little bit forward. All right. Now, when you're taking tape off of a piece of watercolor paper or Bristol board or anything like that, as you're lifting it, one of the things you want to do is you want to just start, at a corner, but you don't want to pull straight up. You want to lay it over and you want to pull and keep it as close to the surface of the paper as you can, and kind of pull it at like just a slight angle. And the reason you want to do that is that it lets the tack of the tape, basically release the paper and it won't tear it. If you go pulling straight up, a lot of times what you'll get is, you'll get where the tooth of the paper gets rough, or sometimes it will actually, tear paper out, and you don't want to do that. That's no fun.
That I would be tempted to, because they're square, to mask a lot of that stuff out, but I think the way he paints, he didn't really need to do that. They have a sort of nice, natural, hand-hewn look to them. They don't look industrial like that. So
You're getting a lot of compliments in the comments. Not a lot of questions, but a lot of compliments.
okay, but I must be making myself clear.
No, you're always clear.
Okay, so I'm like, this is still wet, and we can still play with it. The smoker has gone into this lavender and it's bled itself out. It's still working. It's like it's like a dish that you're cooking, and it's granulating in a really beautiful way. And those are some of the things about watercolor that you just can't get with any other medium. It's just this wonderful granulation that it's a beautiful relationship between the powdered pigment and the tooth of the paper. I know I've got a piece of tape here. I'm going to leave that there until I work in that area. Right now, this tank is back there. I can have a lot of fun with that. I know I had a lot of streaky algae and things like that I was going to do in here. I've got some little bits of brush hair in this wash, and I'm certainly not going to leave it there, but I'm not going to mess with that while it's wet, because this paper is so delicate in its wet stage that any little thing you do is going to show up. And,
what is the paper?
It's a Saunders Waterford 100, I think a 200-pound cold press.
I'm hearing a lot about Saunders lately.
Well, it's a paper that I'm just familiar with, and I like the way it looks. I wouldn't recommend any particular paper. I would just say that if you choose a paper that you like, is stick with it, because it's one element of variables that you can just say, I know how fast that absorbs paper, absorbs paint, and I can anticipate certain effects. If I've got a different paper in there, it's got different characteristics. They all have different sizing. It's a gelatin that they use to make the paper not feel like paper towel. And I know some people even play with making their own sizing and sizing their own paper. I don't think that's necessary, but I do like the way this paper behaves in making textural effects, building material effects, and like I say, I'm just familiar with it. And if it's Arches or Fabriano or any paper that you have, as long as you're familiar with it, you've eliminated one of the many variables you have to think about in watercolor, which is the lightness and darkness of your pigments, the coolness and warmth of it, the wetness of the paper. There may be 6 or 7 major stages of wetness to a piece of paper, from bone dry to sopping wet. And you have to be a little bit attuned to where it's all at a certain stage in your painting. And I don't tend to work all over. I want to take an area, develop it, go on to the next, go on to the next. So that way, my wet bead of paint will always be connecting to the next area that I work in. It's a tendency sometimes, if I have a pale blue on my brush, I'm going to do it all the places where the pale blue is. And I don't think in watercolor that's a really good approach, because you've got 7 or 8 different watercolor drying times going on, and your brain can't, or mine can't anyway, keep all those details in mind.
We have a question from Bill, who says, why does he soak the paper in the tub and then let it dry? Can you explain that?
Why do I soak the paper in the beginning and then let it dry?
Yeah.
Well, I would just you can start to work on it when it's just slightly soft. I tend to just get the paper out there stretched, and then I'll start to draw on top of it after it's already stretched and bone dry. What the first soaking does is expand the paper so you can clinch it down and get it to this point where it'll dry completely flat. And that's the main purpose of pre-soaking. A paper this large is going to expand maybe 4 or 5%. Now, when it tightens up, it's as tight as a drum. And the other reason is, soaking it kind of gets the initial manufactured sizing off the surface of it, and it starts to behave in a way that the pigment's so responsive, or the paper's so responsive to what's going on with it, that it just has some predictable results. It's an excellent question. It's a really good question. I have a lot of questions about stretching. If
Well,
this
one
is
of the
getting
nice
smaller,
things-
I would just tape it down. But full sheet, I really need to have some stretching tricks.
Well, a lot of people have figured these things out after a lifetime of painting, and so these are the kinds of things you're going to learn on Watercolor Live for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go into some of it on my video on.
Okay, I'm going to stop this here. And the reason I'm going to stop it here is because, for the most part, they're just promoting this event, you know, the Watercolor Live thing. But you kind of get a sense of, you know, how he works. And let me see real quick. Okay. Let me file, new window. Let's go to images. Let's just take a look, you know, see a little bit about what he does. See if I can show you some of these. And that way you get a sense of what the finished piece of work looks like. All right, can everybody see that Google search page?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'll just like double click. Good. Okay. All right, come on. Okay, well, let's go back one. All right, so what do I want to try? Try that one.
Those are his strengths.
Yeah. Good. All right, everybody see that?
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to see, you know, sort of the end result, you know, of, you know, kind of how he approaches, you know, laying in paint. We could talk about composition. We could talk about, you know, color temperature, you know, with his work as well. But, you know, kind of nice, loose, you know, watercolory looking stuff.
Yeah, but especially the watercolors of Sargent's. And if you've ever seen any of those, they're just amazing watercolors.
Yeah, I've shown some of them, you know. Now you see the sky?
Yeah.
You know, he's basically just used that mixture of the yellow, cyan, and magenta, you know, to kind of create that, you know, kind of a luminous sky feeling in there. You know, real wet, and then came back in, you know, and laid in this kind of lavender or gray, you know, while it was, again, still wet, so that, you know, you picked up this, you know, very soft, you know, edge in there, which helped, again, not just the color, but the edge of it itself pushed it back, you know, into the distance.
And then he has the scratchiness that he was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, particularly, you know, up toward sort of in the foreground and stuff, creating more texture. And,
right.
And I thought it was kind of interesting, you know, he was talking, now this looks like an oil painting. And he said he was trying to learn oil. This looks like an oil as well.
It says acrylic.
There's acrylic down at the bottom.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so this is watercolor. Yeah, he was talking about using Crayola crayons. Okay.
Yeah, just as a resist.
Right. Yeah. So he go into areas using, sort of a pale color, and then, working over it with darker, passages of paint. It
Yeah,
adds
there. So
little-
there in the water, he has the crayon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could blow these up. Let's see. Can I? Not really. Okay. Yeah. It's not going to let me enlarge them. But using both masking and a resisting approach and technique, you can really do a lot, with that medium and play with it. Now, yeah, this is an oil. Okay, on pen. Yeah. But yeah, he definitely likes a lot of architectural type stuff. That and the effect of atmospheres, clouds, sky. Yeah. Yeah, this is another oil. It's kind of nice. It's an oil. It's on paper. Okay. Yeah, here you have, sort of that drippy effect, and that's oil again. So yeah, he's playing with different medias. Anyway, so you get a sense of, kind of who he is, what he's about, with his work. Any thoughts, comments?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I wish they would use a better presentation. The shadows and the light glare was distracting on the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been edited a whole lot better.
I think if you're going to produce a video, you have a little more optimum surroundings or whatever.
Yeah.
A more professional production.
Right. Well, I mean, okay. What's actually happening, in this particular instance is, you're going, via Zoom, you're going into an artist studio and doing a quick demonstration. And, if you look around your studio, and I know I could look around mine, is it really set up, to do like a video presentation? And for the most part, no. So, people are doing the best they can. And it's a very different thing, doing a live interview with an artist, which you'll get a lot of good information out of. But you may not be able to get, that high level of technical presentation that you would if you had done it, say, at like a Portrait Society conference or something like that, where they've got, the artist painting and they've got a video camera and it's being projected, up on a big screen or something, so you could, actually see what's going on a little more clearly. So yeah, there's some drawbacks, but there's also, the sense of, you get to look at his studio, you kind of get a sense of how he works. Is he sort of an organized person? Is he somebody who is kind of got stuff all over the place and kind of random and very spontaneous? So each one gives you a little bit different information. Okay.
I enjoyed it. I liked his setup there where he stretched his canvas.
Yeah.
That was something interesting.
Yeah. I've never actually seen those. When I first looked at it, what it reminded me of was a drafting table with what they call a mainline ruler on it. And I thought that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, but the fact is that, yeah, it was actually clamps that clamped down on all four sides of the paper. And then, you know, and he put it in there wet, and then as it dried, it did the same thing as, you know, when we hand stretched watercolor paper, you know, on a drawing board. You know, and at any time, you know, if you don't buy watercolor in blocks, you know, then that's kind of part of the process. You got to wet the paper, you got to put it on a board, you've got to tape the edges, and then you've got to give it time to dry, you know. And depending on your technique, you know, some artists will let it dry overnight, you know, so you have to kind of, if you're going to work the next day, you got to kind of pre-plan for that. You know, other artists will stretch a piece of paper, you know, tape it, give it a half hour, 45 minutes, then come back and actually start working on it when it's still damp. And
different effects for different lengths of dryness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
how long do you soak it in the tub?
About 5 minutes, you know, 5-10 minutes is really all you need. Because all you're really wanting to do is you're wanting to wet it, which will get all the fiber in the paper to relax and stretch. And then as it dries, all of those are shrinking again and pulling taut.
Yeah, I thought the point where he said you remove the sizing and that'll give you more flexibility with the paints.
Yeah. Well, the paper will take the paint in a different way. If, you know, one of the drawbacks of working on a block is that you're working, you know, generally on a dry piece of paper. Now you can wet a block, you know, because it is already pre-stretched, and you could work, you know, into that wet surface. But as soon as you start wetting watercolor paper, you know, the sizing is going to start leaching out of it. And, you know, if you've soaked it in a tub, you've basically taken that sizing and you've washed it away. If you're wetting a block down and you're working into a wet block, then that sizing is actually suspended in the water that you're putting your paint into. And it can give it, you know, kind of a mottled effect, you know, where it resists the paint settling, you know, evenly. So, you know, again, you know, it depends on the, you know, the effect that you're looking for and how you want to work. You know, but in stretching the paper and then putting it down on a board, you know, if you're one of those people who you like very fluid sort of watercolor and you like to see the paint sort of do what the paint will do naturally, you know, letting it dry a half hour or whatever, and then start laying in, you know, your big blocks and washes of color, you know, you can do that and watch the color sort of diffuse, you know, and really soften. And in fact, Sargent and other like Winslow Homer, you know, different people who did more finished watercolor works, you know, would kind of take that approach where they would work into that wet piece of paper and wouldn't let it dry totally. And then they would let it dry further and come back in several hours later when they wanted to put more precise marks and things down on it, you know, and then, you know, because then the watercolor wouldn't, you know, bleed again. So, you know, there's lots of different ways of approaching it, you know, and it's a great medium to work with. You know, and if you haven't worked with watercolor before, you know, it's something fun to play with, and you can get some things that, like he was saying, you know, no other medium, you know, will get that effect. You know, you can't get it in oil, you can't get it with acrylic or anything else. Watercolor is kind of this unique thing all into itself, and you know, and that's why they don't call it painting as well, because you're not working with the same process. You know, watercolors are watercolor. They're not watercolor paintings. They're just watercolor. Painting is where you're starting with darks, working to light. Watercolor is more like drawing, where you're starting off and you're building up your darks, you know, from the light. So different way of thinking. Okay, let's take a look at the second guy here. And again, this is another Streamline video. Now he's talking about color. I know you guys don't want to know anything about color, since most of you worry about it way too much. All right, so this is West Fraser, and let me see if I can get past, well, I want him to introduce him.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the invitation to join you today. We love it. So tell us where you are. You're in your studio, obviously, and where is your studio? My studio is in Charleston, South Carolina, in what is called the Confederate Home for Orphans and Widows. It's a very old building, and this is where I spend the majority of my time. Social distancing came easy for me. Yeah, well, that's the life of an artist. It's like, what's changed, right? Exactly. Yeah, you also have a studio in Costa Rica, I understand. I do. My wife and I spend half the year there in Guanacaste on the Pacific. Fraser, our guest today. West, welcome.
I didn't mean
to in Costa Rica, I understand. I do. My wife and I spend half the year there in Guanacaste on the Pacific West Coast. And I built the ideal studio there, with a standalone building, not far from our residence, and it's sort of like heaven. So,
right. I'm going to skip ahead, you know, so we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes.
All right, to our guest, West Fraser. Welcome back, West. Thank you. Sounds like you've got a busy schedule there, Eric. Trying to keep up. So, tell us what you're going to do now. I'm curious about, you're going to work on this painting, or are you going to use this painting as an example? Help me understand what the lesson is going to be. So, to me, a painting is really all about creating an illusion. And that's all we do. And the tools we have to create that illusion are the pigments on your palette. So what I'm going to try to do is take your guest through the steps and the thought processes that I went through at creating this painting. And, you know, this painting is predominantly in the white family. There have been many white paintings of fame in the past. My favorite painting almost of all time, one of them is James McNeill Whistler's The White Girl, or Symphony in White #1. Now, when he painted this in 1863, it was submitted to the Salon, refused, and was exhibited in Napoleon III's Salon de Refuse. And he painted it in a tonal manner. Now, a tone is a color with white, with black added, or a shade is with white with black. A tone is pigment with white added. So, in his painting, White Girl, he created a flat pattern painting, which was avant-garde and scandalous at the time. But you'll notice that there's not a whole lot of color nuance of light and reflection, etc. It's more just white, flat light, and patterning. Now, that's very different from what Joaquin Sorolla did. Joaquin Sorolla was born the same year that Whistler submitted this painting to the Salon. So that's the next slide, Eric.
There are Testoroya paintings. Which one do you want?
The mother and child.
All right.
So in this painting in 1895, this was a transition period when artists had more color theory, they had more choice of pigments, and Sorolla was really keen with his color and creating a sense of light. You'll see in this the cool light and warm shadows. It's very, very subtle. It's probably a couple of windows that the bed is next to. You see a warm shadow going across the bed, and then you see some really cool, darker shadows that are influenced by the dark ceiling of the room, obviously. And then you'll see a gradation of warm over to cool on the far wall. But this is a painting of light using subtle temperature changes in white. Now, the other painting of Sorolla's, Sewing the Sails, is one of my favorite paintings of all time. And this is a different kind of handling of white in a painting. And this is more dappled light, so it's obvious light source or obvious light color. So the color of the light is what is in the white of the sail. The shadows of the sail is either a direct shadow or the color is a bounced shadow color. So that's what I'm going to try to share with viewers today. I went into the coast of Georgia recently, took my boat in searching for new subject matter, and I found a wealth of subject matter. And the painting here that I'm going to share and talk through was done on from St. Catherine's Island in Georgia, which is a completely undeveloped 12-mile island with white sand beaches. And this is an inlet that comes in from the ocean directly into the estuary, marsh estuary on the ocean side of the island. It's completely unique. There's not, I don't know of any other big sea islands that have this type of terrain. So if you'll go to slide 1, Eric, that shows my palette. So the warms and cools I've designated, that's pretty obvious. I think people understand what that is. And I will say that if you add white to a color, it cools it off. But the game and the challenge and problem solving is what I'm hoping to take you through. Show the next slide. Now, these are just the tools. So as I say, making a painting is not unlike making music. It's only pleasing if you masterfully organize the chords, notes, and melody. And the palette you have, that's your keyboard, and the only tools you have for composing the symphony. So the object called a painting is merely a perceived illusion. You have to make the illusion believable. So I'm going to give you the tools. One of the tools is to remember that your greatest contrast is the complementary color. All of your viewers know all about complementary colors.
I wouldn't assume that. I would not assume that. I think it would be worth explaining.
Okay, well, complementary color. The example here I have of the bar is blue and orange. On the color wheel, you just take the exact opposite color. So the yellow and purple, yellow, green, and red, violet, green and red, blue, green, and red, orange, etc. Those are your complements. You mix them together and in certain proportions, and you get black. So, interesting note, orange and blue proportions are 2 to 3. So it takes 3 proportions of blue to 2 proportions of orange to make black. Yellow it's 3 proportion purple to 1 proportion of yellow to make black, and red and green are equal proportions. So you also use that when you're trying to develop a harmony in a painting. You have to consider, oftentimes people make paintings that are way too dominant in intensity or color or something. So some of these tools I'm going to help you with, but to show how not to do that. But that's actually not the lesson today. The lesson today is about color temperature. So let's see the next slide. These are some things to consider as well. The very hottest color in pigments is orange, and the coolest is blue-green. The very brightest color hue is yellow, and the darkest is violet. Okay? So those are considerations. If you're working on a passage of form, if you can stay within that form by keeping analogous family colors. So yellow to blue-violet, that's analogous. And from yellow to red-violet, those are analogous. They're in the same family where you don't quite go to the complement. And this also helps with if you're cooling or warming off a hue, you can, if you stay within close to those analogies, then you can cool off color instead of making it muddy. Okay, so next, those are your perceived contrasts. Next slide. This is very important, and it's helped me tremendously in developing paintings over the years. Obviously, I've shown you again, reiterated the cool and warm of colors, but the emotive contrast, where I have listed in the middle, I find most people don't consider. These are from studies I made on my own from Johannes Itten, and from experience and just delving into and reading and finding these little tidbits and snippets of information, and then trying to figure out how to make them apply to my work. I found that this lesson that I'm trying to do today of color temperature is one of the paramount lessons. So the emotive contrast. Warm is sunshine and cool is shadow. Warm is opaque and cool is transparent. So if you're doing a still life and you're having trouble determining how to make an object opaque compared to transparent, you consider transparent as warm or cooler, and opaque is warmer. And it's all about relationships. It's very subtle relationships that we're dealing with. So, and then you've got your stimulant is warm, and a sedative is cool. Thick is warm, thin is cool, earthy is warm, airy is cool. That's extremely important. I reiterate it all the time when I'm teaching. Earth is always warm. If you're doing a passage of trees or you're doing anything that's of earth, has to be warmer in comparison to the sky. So near is warm when you're setting up your darks in the foreground and warms in the foreground. Everything proceeds into a cooler space in atmospheric perspective. That's another lesson. So heavy is warm and light in weight is cool. Dry is warm. Wet is cool. That's a major part of this lesson today. And then animate, again with earthy. Animate is warm. Inanimate is cool. So let that.
So what do you mean by stimulant and and sedative?
Well, these are emotive qualities that Johannes Itten and some other color scientists discovered. Some of these things, like stimulant and sedative, are really more relatable to, say, interior decorators or restaurateurs when they choose a color for their restaurant, okay? Or a doctor's office. If you don't want people to fall asleep in a doctor's office, you would use a warmer color. Or if you want people to be calm, sedative, you would use a cooler color. Understand that?
So if you're trying to create a mood that makes people like chill out or relax when they watch it, then you're going for the cool side. I get it now.
Correct. And sometimes it's applicable to a painting. I would think probably more so in an abstract painting, but also if you're dealing with a color theme in a realistic traditional painting, it can be considered as well. These are tools when you're trying to problem solve and you're struggling with why is this not working. You can refer to these types of things.
All right, I've got your next slide up.
Okay, so I mentioned I went into the coast of Georgia, and it was a certain place that I had to get in and out pretty quickly. So I did not take my painting gear. It was more of a research trip. But I did jump out and make some sketches. This, I do these, and I make my shorthand notes that help me figure out how to interpret a digital photograph when I get home. So I basically use the digital photographs as memory to jog my memory. And in reality, the things that I'm going through today is how you make a painting. I don't ever copy a photograph because photographs lie. And from my experience over the years and years of painting plein air and observing, I've come to terms and understanding that using this, what Joe Paquette calls prismatic approach, you can develop a painting, you can create form intellectually, almost more so than observational. So purely observational would be trying to copy what you see exactly. And what I'm trying to convey today is that making a painting is more than just copying exactly, because that's more of the surface tension and surface look. What I'm trying to share is that what you really have to do is make the illusion that is believable. So
you just briefly tell us about what a couple of your notes, like a 2 gray, I assume that's a 2 value gray.
Yes, I'll do a less and more sign. Sometimes I'll do a percentage. So it's almost too small for me, Eric, to see. But
okay, yeah.
I show that the hot spot is reflected down in the water line. You'll see it in the painting. The grays in the sky are, I believe I noted that they're like 10% darker than the shadow sand area. Notes like that, just comparisons and relationships.
All right.
It helps me interpret and remember what I saw. And like I said, the digital photograph just jogs the memory. Right, next slide. So this is the beginning block in. I have to admit, and I think it's important for students to realize that you oftentimes have to scrape and start over again. So when I started the painting, I had the horizon way too high, and I just quickly scraped it all off. It actually gave me a nice tone to work with. So this is blocking in, establishing the warm darks on the left and the tree line and the dark part of what would be the grass, and then the darks in the sand, as well as what the shapes of the grays in the cloud are going to be, circular, especially where the hot spot's going to be, the temperature of the sky, values of the sky, etc. Okay, you can go to the next. So this is developing more of the values, the temperatures, establishing the shadow and the sunlight. So the sunlight is that yellowish hot spot going right across from the center to the left, also on what is a sandbar to the right. And so then I'm trying to deal with another important part of that was establishing the cool of the water. So going back again, it's the value of the cool in that water with the blue greens is very similar to the value of the sunlight when the sun is hitting.
Yeah, so that's confusing me because I would have looked at that blue green and said that's actually a very warm passage because it's got a lot of yellow in it.
Right, because yellow green, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, I used a combination of yellow green for the foreground where the sunlight is hitting the water and right next to the sunlight hitting the sand. So you have to, water has to be cool. So this is just establishing the relationships. And then in the distance, water that behind the sandbar structure is more blue-green because as it recedes, it cools off.
Right.
Okay. You see that relationship? It's hard to see, but these are just intellectually things that you have to know, you have to consider,
these two areas,
establish it, and then you can, you know, noodle the painting and coax the colors in and out of the painting.
Okay.
That was based on Viridian and yellow, I believe, cadmium yellow light.
So is that yellow green a cool or is it a warm?
Yellow green is a cool, but it's warmer than any other cool.
Okay. All right.
So it's still in that cool family. And water is cool compared to earth. Earth is warm. So if you're trying to establish, it's very important to establish the temperature and the color of that, where the sun was hitting the sand. It's a big part of the painting where that sun is coming across. And so I had to early on establish this cool and warm relationship. Okay?
Yep.
So then the next slide is just developing more of the painting and the values of the painting, tones. I grayed out the sky more, keeping it cool. Everything is cool. It's first. I wanted that sunshine on the sand established so that I knew how to gauge things around it. And I'm still just laying in the groundwork that I can work into with brighter, lighter, more intense colors as I go. Okay. Next one.
Am I on the right slide?
I think so, yeah. There's a subtle difference in this, but I'm starting to develop a little bit more in the sand. I'm warming it up where it's dry, keeping to the right where it's still wet from tidal changes. It's still staying cool because it's wetter, and I'm trying to establish the dry warmness of that sand in the middle, Eric. Okay. And a little bit more of the sky. I think I probably lightened up some of the gray in that horizon of the sky, and developed a little bit more of the What I'm really trying to do is that relationship of the gray and the clouds and the gray shadow of the sun. And one of the, talking about muddy mixtures, one of the problems I see in beginners' work is that they'll oftentimes make a passage in a sky way too muddy, and that goes back to warm and muddy. And that goes back to the idea that Earth is warm and air is cool. So I think the motive contrast terms I gave always kind of refer back to.
All right, I've got the next slide up.
All right, so that shows what I have used so far. These are the blues of the sky, and it gradates from the blue-green, yellow-green, down closer to the horizon and closer to the sunspot, up through the blues into a violet at the top. The bright yellow ochre, the Naples Yellow, there near the blues, that's the sand. And then the cooler white that's next to the Naples, that's the lights in the cloud. So you can see the subtle difference of that Naples and the light in the clouds. The light in the clouds is cool. And then to the right, you see the differences in the sand, the shadow part of the sand, and then a little bit of the cooler part, which is more of the wet sand. That's the relationship that I like to show.
I'm going to go back to that other slide just so they can look at it now. Now you can see that gradation in the sky.
Yep, exactly.
You can see the variations in the sand. All right,
exactly.
So now
I'll keep developing, moving that forward. And then, so this one continues. And one thing you have to be careful of is you don't want to go too white or light value too fast. Because painting is sculpting. You're sculpting the forms that you're creating with the pigment. So you want to be sure that you start with darker, warmer in the earth, darker, cooler in the sky, that you paint around. Always cover it. But it's very difficult to go back into thick white paint. That's when people make things very muddy. So I'm continuing to develop the reflection of the water on the right, and keeping in mind the emotive relationships of the temperature in the clouds and the sand, especially the sunlight hitting the sand and striking the land. That's a Naples and cadmium orange mix for the sand, and more intensity of the pigments in the grass and the trees. I typically, when sunlight is hitting a form, I typically make that color more intense and warm. That's how I connote usually sunlight on forms.
all right.
So the shadow over the sand, you can't make it too dark because the whole landscape I'm in is completely filled with light. You've got light bouncing off of the clouds. You've got light in the foreground that you're staring into. It's just light filled. So everything is full of light. It's just a difference in temperature. Direct sunlight hitting the forms is much warmer. The light from the bounce light from the sky and the clouds is cooler. So the sand that I'm using, sand color that I'm using, I'm taking a violet and adding Naples and yellow ochre to take it into a gray, adding a little bit of iridium or blue-green to it that cools it off. And I'm still trying to establish what color it is up near that hot spot in the sand where the sun is striking the sand. So you don't want that too dark. It would look like a ledge if it was too dark going up to it. So that's the relationship you have to establish, and how that is relating to the sky grays before you really start finishing out the painting.
Now, what I'm seeing there is, and maybe I'm not seeing it at all, but I think I'm seeing a movement from the yellow to a slight orange, which would be kind of moving through the spectrum. Is that like at the edge where the cool meets the light? It feels to me like it's a little orangier than the yellow there. Am I missing that? Is that right?
Eric, on the sand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the hot spot is, where the hot spot meets the sand.
Right, where the sunlight hits the sand.
Yes.
Well, I probably adjusted it for value and intensity. And I remember I started off with more of a Naples and orange to lay it in to get started. So some of that orange, I like to layer things. Some of that more orange is underneath. It gives it some integrity. It gives it some weight. You'll see that throughout all of my paintings, that there's always an undercurrent or an painting of certain things.
All right, perfect. Okay, next slide. Like
So,
this is called finish.
Okay. So I knew in the very beginning of doing this painting that the only way to create the illusion of light was to suggest a prismatic diffraction effect in the sunspot. So this is a little bit more refined. I think we missed a slide, but that's okay.
Oh, well, let me go back to it. I have sunspot. This is number 13.
Okay. All right. Hold that one for a second. Okay. In the sunspot in the sky, you'll see that the sun is yellow. Now, go to the next slide. You'll see how I turned the yellow. I took the complement, which is violet, and I mixed a violet white, and placed that on the yellow. So it's violet surrounded by yellow, and that is the way to get the highest contrast.
Really?
So you'll see that it's not a color necessary. It doesn't necessarily look yellow, but it is the highest, brightest point in the whole painting, which is what I'm trying to base everything off of. So, and then to get to the finish, I have to create the illusion of, in the blue part of the sky, it's influenced by the warm sun, so it goes I start placing in some yellow greens around the sun, and into, I think maybe in the next slide it'll show it, a little bit more adjustment of the color of the sky near the sun, and then it immediately goes away into the blue greens and the blues and then the violets, as well as in the water on the bottom right, picking up a little bit more of the color in the clouds or the sunspot. Some in still water that's within the sand there, you'll see kind of a textural part of the sand. That's still water, and it will have a direct reflection, whereas moving water of any kind diffuses the direct reflection just a little bit, even if it's still water. But little pockets of water captured by the sand is absolutely still. So it's reflecting much more of that yellow, yellow-green in the hot spot of the sky, and the violets and the et cetera from that area is reflected down there in that passage of water. And then you'll also notice on the left-hand side where the sand, the plane of the sand is not rising up out of the water, but it's flattening off and falling back away from the sun. So there's passages in there that are still white, but they're much cooler because it's reflecting the sky above. It's much cooler than on the middle sand that on the right-hand side of that clump of grass. It's much warmer because it is picking up the light reflected from the heat of the clouds in the distance.
Sure.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
How much of that did you guys actually get? Actually understand?
I'm going to get my lunch.
No, actually, quite a bit, really, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, he had he was giving.
It's a lot to absorb. You won't remember everything, but there's a lot. I think I picked up some things.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, particularly when you're trying to create contrast and you're talking about trying to create the highest contrast in the painting. You know,
Right.
One of the tricks that you could use is that shift in temperature, you know, say from something that's like a very pale violet, right? So it's white and violet together against something that's, you know, warmer and a direct complement, which is something yellow. And even if that yellow is grayed down, you know, against that violet, it's still going to give you quite a bit of a jump or a pop, you know, in your color. And, you know, because you're not just going to see the color shift, you're also going to see that temperature shift. And so, you know, it's an effective tool. And, you know, we've been talking more and more about not just the use of value, you know, and intensity, but also that shift in temperature, you know, to really help you create, you know, this really complete illusion of form, you know, whether on a figure or in a landscape, on a tree, something like that. It's one of those things that if you begin to think about it and be more aware of it as you're mixing color and trying to turn form around something, not only shifting the value and the intensity, but also shifting the temperature as well, you'll find it much easier to get those effects and have like really three-dimensional feeling paintings instead of something that's flat. Okay.
That Naples Yellow, that's dark or light?
Well, Naples Yellow would generally be light.
Oh, it's yellow. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a dark value. Okay. Now you can darken yellow and make it a darker value, but it's never going to be, you're never going to darken yellow down to be as dark as, say, like
No,
a black.
It will change the color.
Well, yeah, it will. Yeah, considerably. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyway, thank you all for coming. All right. Think about that. Maybe get out a little bit of paint, you know, play with it, you know, see how much contrast you can get, you know, by using direct complements and shifting the temperatures. Okay.
Charles, who was the artist?
His last name was West.
Or was his first name West?
No, that was his last name. I think it was, I want to say it was Frank West. I could be here.
West Frazier.
Or West Frazier. Yeah.
Yeah, West was his first name. That's
Yeah,
right.
okay, yeah, you're right. West Frazier. Okay.
Fraser. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And you found this where?
Well, it's on YouTube, but it's part of that Streamline video or Streamline art videos that Eric Rhodes is doing.
Okay. Streamlight.
Streamline.
Oh, line.
Streamline art.
Okay.
Okay. And
Eric.
yeah,
Rhodes.
Eric Rhodes. Yeah.
RHOADES.
I don't know if it has an A. I thought it was RHODES.
Okay.
It could be maybe A. I'm not sure how to spell his name.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay. But if you're looking for that specific video, it's titled "Mastering Color Temperature with West Fraser."
Okay. Run that one again. But mastering
Color temperature
Oh,
with West Fraser.
okay.
And you can find that on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to sit through that again. That was
Yeah, it's
pretty subtle.
Yeah, it's a lot to absorb. It really is. And it's anytime you get into talking about color, you can get off into it, so deep, that you're talking about these little nuances and stuff. But I thought that this particular video was pretty good because he's talking about one particular painting and you're looking at the process and how he's using that shift in temperature and the effect that it gets in certain areas, like up around, say, the glow of the sun, right? And, he starts off with these yellowish mixtures, and then he puts in that it looks like white, but it's actually white and violet. So he gets that contrast. And then he begins to shift temperature, as it moves away from it, with a little bit of that, kind of blue-green, in the cloud, into the gray. So, and again, it's that back and forth, playing with temperature. And it's a real subtle thing, but it does make a huge difference, in creating
Nice.
those three-dimensional forms. So.
Yeah, it's nice coastal picture too. It feels like real, like you could walk into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and he has a very different approach than I would take. I would take a watercolor pad or something out there or something, actually just put color down, sitting there and doing like a little diagram and making color notes to me. It's such a, it really is such a subtle thing that unless I'm actually sitting there mixing the color and trying to match what I see, I'm not going to remember that when I get back, to the
Right, and he said he had very limited time out there, so a watercolor would go much faster.
Yeah, that would kind of be my approach, But even, even if you didn't have like your oils and stuff like that, even, working with like color pencils or something like that real quick, just to, because you can control value and temperature with those, fairly well. And you can do it fairly quickly as well.
And I would lean toward taking several pictures.
Yeah. You could always try to bracket your photography, but a lot of people are not sophisticated photographers. They don't understand that concept. But you could bracket your photography. So you take a picture for the sky, you take a picture for the land masses, for the shadows, for the lights, so you've got something to compare to.
Or what I would do would be when the light comes out, take a picture of how it reflects, and then a little bit cloudier and then the darker.
Yeah.
So you have all those contrasts there.
Yeah. If you can get it to do it within the time frame.
Well, you have to work with what you got. Right.
Mother Nature does not always, cooperate, in that sense.
No, it doesn't, but you try to get it to work with you so you know what you're doing.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, anyway.
Well, that was good. I enjoyed it.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. And we will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And if you've got anything to submit, anything you want to talk about, you know, send it in. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Eloise, it was nice seeing you again. Naomi, we're glad you made it. Hopefully, you know, you're listening. All right, talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Charles.
Bye, Eloise.
Bye.